Welcome art fans to the main event, the schedule painting, with our first competitor weighing 275 pounds from parts unknown, the Intercontinental Champion, the Ultimate Warrior. Just like winning a wrestling match, this painting is going to get ugly, very ugly, before it gets good. So strap yourself in. Look, when I create, I'm guilty of thinking I'm going to paint something truly epic, with the hope that when I pop my clogs it will grace the galleries of London, New York or Paris. 6 foot surreal flamingos, impressionistic flowers, thickly painted portraits. But listen, art might be a hugely serious business. Some might say it's stuck up and snobby, but don't confuse the art market and the dealers with the artists behind it. Rich, poor, tall, small, wrestling fans? Art is for everybody. The first time most kids hold a pencil, they stick it up their nose. Me, I was drawn before I was walking. But yeah, the first time I held a pencil, just like you, I stuck up my nose.
Because we all have a crayon up our nose.
Kids love art. The point is, I loved art from a young age, just like you did. I remember drawing larger-than-life, colourful characters because it was fun. I just never stopped.
Don't be like me and use your minds. Paint a painting.
And I'm going to kickstart my channel by painting something fun. One of the most charismatic, bold individuals that left a mark in my childhood. And they don't come much more colourful than James Brian Hellwig, aka the Ultimate Warrior, or Jim to his friends. And it's pretty damn hard to label WWF fans stuck up and snobby. Yeah, I said WWF. If you were born the wrong side of the most recent millennium, you're probably wondering what pandas have to do with this. And you're right, that was a terrible joke. But I'm from the generation before World Wrestling Entertainment. I'm not a WWE kid, I'm a WWF kid. The World Wrestling Federation. It just sounds right. Particularly the golden generation of the early 90s. They just had bags of character, larger than life, vibrant personalities. But by the late 90s, to me it just seemed the imagination was drying up. Black shorts. Plenty of black shorts. Too many black shorts. Wrestling was maturing, targeting a modern audience in the Attitude Era, so they called it. But I missed the glory days. I never forget begging my parents to buy the Wrestlemania VI videotape. The cover with the mustachioed Hulk Hogan, clad in his iconic yellow vest and red bandana, clutching the black Eagle Championship belt. And there he was stood side by side with the bulging muscles of the Ultimate Warrior, clad in neon face paint, green shorts and the yellow Intercontinental belt. This fight was so hyped up. Title for title, champion versus champion. This fight was bigger than Thunderlips versus Rocky Balboa. God, it was even bigger than the Ultimate Warrior versus Phil Collins. You heard right. The WWF World Heavyweight Champion Hulk Hogan versus the Intercontinental Champion, the Ultimate Warrior, in front of 67,000 fans at the Sky Dome in Toronto. I mean, I was 7 at the time of Wrestlemania VI. We didn't have Sky, and we never paid for our pay-per-view. I probably didn't get the video till I was 8, maybe even 9, and I just loved the energy of the Warrior. Sprinting to the ring, shaking the ropes for a energy boost. All the boys in the playground had the classic wrestling figures, and before you start saying I'm sexist, the girls just didn't have them. Not in the 90s. And the Ultimate Warrior was my pride and joy. The atmosphere was electric. The fight started with a shove from Warrior and a return shove by the Hulk. Just checking each other out, I think Gorilla Monsoon might have said, followed by a show of strength. The Warrior getting one up on the Hulkster, then the Hulkster getting one up on the Warrior. One of the most balanced fights I've ever seen played out. Arguably as an adult too balanced, but as a kid, it was just perfect. Respect from both men, acknowledging both were fan favourites and legends of the sport. Sure, the finished artwork isn't going to be a serious piece of art, and it will never adorn a gallery wall, but I'm okay with that. A little bit of nostalgia is good for you. Remember, we were all young once, we're all just big kids, but some of us forget. So that's the why. Now the how. The painting started with a very rough oil sketch. It's so rough I'd argue it didn't serve any purpose, other than it didn't persuade me to halt the project. I've always liked large canvases, but more often than not they're just not practical for regular artwork, unless you have a buyer in mind. So I've realised smaller canvas boards are, and even paper, if primed right, are just so much more practical for storage. So Warrior finds himself on a rather modest 12 by 16 inch canvas board. I do wish I'd gone for a 6-foot painting, but it just didn't make sense. I almost always use Winsor & Newton paint. I think I have one colour it's not, a random white, for no real reason, to be honest. I'll await the sponsorship deal. Over the past 20 plus years I've collected just about every possible colour. Sure, an artist could survive on just the primaries, plus white, maybe black. We should mix our colours and understand colour theory. But I'm colourblind and I use that as my excuse. But in truth, I just like a lot of colour. So no Zorn palette for me. The Martin Kelly palette is 33 colours, not free. So you can expect vast colour from my videos, but I am an experimental artist, in both subject and technique, so maybe I should try the Zorn palette, just once, and what do you think I should paint? Back to the portrait. I decided on a simple pose. The Warrior is already wild enough without a crazy composition. I took a still from the Wrestlemania VI pre-match interview.
You are nothing but normal! You don't deserve to breathe the same air that I and Hulk Hogan do!
My initial vision was a subtle Van Gogh inspired background, not too dissimilar to this dog portrait I painted fairly recently. I wanted the background to be leaning towards Starry Night, symbolising the great wrestling stars, bigger, brighter, but also twinkling at the Skydome Arena lights to signify the big event. Then there was Warrior himself. It's a portrait after all. My first mistake, I regretted the pose. The limitation of painting from a still. The image was just too tame. I wish I went for more aggression, or looked at Warrior on a loop, almost as if I was painting from life. Mostly because artists tend to exaggerate things. If you're painting angry, it gets more angry. If you're painting tame, it gets more tame. Certainly, I do. And somehow, I exaggerate that tameness. The Warrior is anything but tame. The project wasn't going particularly well, so I put down the paints, needing fresh perspective, and started a new project. Well, kind of. Ultimate Warrior in Posca markers, then Hulk, Animal, Macho Man, Papa Shango, Bret Hart. I just couldn't stop. But I had to. I couldn't tell you what this accomplished. Perhaps a step back to remind myself this was meant to be fun, not the wrestling match that it had become. But eventually I had to return to the challenge, at least with a fresh set of eyes. The exaggerated tameness was still very much there. The eyes looked pathetic. They needed to be more lion than gazelle. So I angled the brow a bit more and tweaked till I got a better balance, hoping that the iconic face paint would bring some harmony and make the face more recognisable and Warrior-like. I wasn't too concerned with accuracy. Warrior changes his face paint constantly. The aim was for it to feel like Warrior. Inside a black template, I started with a stripe of orange. I liked it. Then I debated over yellow or green. I went with the latter, with less vibrancy to balance the orange. I liked that too, but it lacked the Warrior vibrancy. He was neon during WrestleMania VI, so with the green I knew I'd revisit later. And then I used pink to complete the look, for now. Somewhere in adding the face paint, Warrior's eyes lost some more aggression, again. Something wasn't quite right. Probably the eyes were a problem, and certainly the mouth too small. So I painted the mouth again, and I actually loved the way it looked, but heck, it was way too small. And then I had the problem of whether to erase a good bit of paintwork. But a lion can't have a mouth too small to bite a gazelle's neck. Better be brave and start again. So I scrubbed at it, and I scrubbed out the mouth, and I painted another. And I think I painted another, and maybe another. Probably 5 different mouths in total. With creativity, you have to balance logic and problem solving. Art is about technique, skill, and observation. It's why I think art can be learnt, but creativity and desire is often the stumbling block. My concept for teeth? Don't paint teeth. Paint an impression. Stand back. If they look like teeth from a distance, then that's probably good enough. Detailed teeth look weird with paint. Try to use maybe a dirty white, tint with blue, or maybe a Payne's grey. Anything but pure white. I'm not a portrait painter. I won't kid that I am. I'm a long way from that title. When I do paint portraits, they're usually from imagination, so likeness is less important. And getting a resemblance is a trial for any portrait artist. And I really knew a small mouth was going to make the warrior look weak, so it had to get bigger. Getting the iconic yellow Intercontinental belt in was important to date the 1990 WrestleMania event, and I purposefully bought gold paint, and I'm glad that I did. I could have used greys and yellows or any combination of colours, but I think the gold just lifted it and gave that magic level of detail. Accurate, but not too fuzzy. Like teeth, a rough impression was the way to go. The portrait was heading in the right direction, but the overall image was lacking harmony. Warrior, like many muscle-bound men from the United States of America, has that superficial bodybuilder mahogany skin tone, but I think too much brown was dampening the overall visual, so I decided to get more purple in the shadows. A magenta and French marine blue mix hopefully provided some resolve, creating a more coherent painting. Applying the highlights in the hair really started to pull this painting together. Often the little final touches are what makes or breaks it. Taking a step back is a great way to get a feeling for a painting. No TV or mobile phone screen will compensate for seeing a painting in the flesh, but Warrior pops off the canvas like a magic eye picture. Ultimately, the Warrior would get the better of Hulk Hogan with a big splash. But the Hulkster left the champion of the people, handing the Warrior his belt. No one can dispute Hulk Hogan is the biggest thing to happen to wrestling. Married to the sport, dominating consistently for decades, whilst the Warrior, in comparison, had a fleeting romance. But the fans will never forget the Ultimate Warrior. When Jim Hellwig returned to WWF in 2014 in his mid-50s to be inducted into the Hall of Fame on the 5th of April, he would stand in the ring the next day at the Superdome in New Orleans, Louisiana, to speak to the ecstatic joy of his loyal fans.
I am Ultimate Warrior. You are the Ultimate Warrior fans. And the spirit of Ultimate Warrior will run forever.
He would, however, heartbreakingly die just 2 days later. It's not a masterpiece, but I'm very proud of this one. I set out to have fun and deliver a colourful painting, and I nailed it. It brings back childhood memories. That is the Ultimate Warrior, and this was my first art video. Hopefully I've done enough for you to smash that like button, and I'll see you on the next one.